In August of 1977, a quiet working-class family in Enfield, North London, suddenly found themselves at the center of one of the most chilling paranormal cases ever recorded. What makes this story terrifying isn't just the events themselves. It's the fact that everything you're about to hear was reported in newspapers, documented by police officers, witnessed by journalists, and even captured on camera. To this day, no one has been able to explain it.
The Hodgson family seemed ordinary. Single mother Peggy lived with her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy, in a modest council house. Life was tough but manageable, until one August evening when 11-year-old Janet and her sister Margaret began hearing strange noises in their bedroom. At first, it sounded like furniture scraping against the floor. The girls ran to their mother in fear, but Peggy dismissed it. "You're just scaring yourselves," she told them, and sent them back to bed. But the next night, Peggy herself heard it, the heavy sound of a dresser sliding across the room. Terrified, she rushed in to stop it. She tried pushing the dresser back, but something unseen pushed against her with such force that she couldn't move it. That was the moment Peggy realized something far beyond her understanding had invaded her home. Panicked, Peggy ran to her neighbors for help. The neighbors entered the house and immediately heard loud knocks and bangs coming from the walls. They were so unsettled that they decided to call the police. When Officer Carolyn Heaps arrived, she sat in the living room trying to calm the family, when suddenly, right before her eyes, a wooden chair slid several feet across the floor. She inspected it, trying to debunk what she'd seen, but there was no rational explanation. And most importantly, she wrote it down in her official police report. This was no longer just a family story, it was on record. Within days, the activity intensified. Toys were hurled across rooms, beds shook violently, doors slammed, and heavy knocking echoed through the house at night. But the most disturbing experiences centered on Janet. She began to faint unexpectedly, and her voice sometimes changed into a deep, gravelly tone that didn't sound human. The voice called itself Bill, an old man who claimed to have died in the house. "I died in that chair in the corner of this room," the voice growled through Janet's mouth. Investigators were stunned. They tested her, even putting her under hypnosis, yet the strange voice continued. Experts later analyzed the recordings and concluded that such a sound would be impossible for a young girl to sustain using only her vocal cords. By now, the press had caught wind of the story. Daily Mirror reporters visited the house and were immediately shaken when Lego bricks and marbles began flying across the room, one striking a photographer hard enough to leave a mark on his forehead. The reporters snapped dozens of photographs, including the now infamous image of Janet apparently being thrown from her bed mid-air. Skeptics insisted she was simply jumping, but those in the room swore it wasn't a leap, it was as though something had hurled her. Soon, members of the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, began a full investigation. 4 months, they documented strange events. Objects levitating, knocks that responded intelligently to questions, and cold gusts of air in sealed rooms. They recorded hundreds of hours of audio, filled with unexplained raps, metallic sounds, and disembodied voices. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous American paranormal investigators, also traveled to Enfield. Lorraine later said she felt a truly evil presence in the house, and warned that Janet was at risk of possession. The most frightening incidents involved Janet. Witnesses claimed to see her lifted from her bed, suspended nearly a foot off the ground. Investigators captured photographs of the levitations, though skeptics remain divided about what the images really show. In one chilling episode, Janet spoke in the voice of Bill for hours, describing how he had died in the house years earlier. Later, researchers discovered that a man named Bill Wilkins had indeed lived and died at that very address. He'd suffered a fatal hemorrhage while sitting in a chair in the living room. The connection was undeniable. The haunting dragged on for nearly 2 years. By 1979, the activity slowly faded. The Hodgsons eventually returned to some sense of normal life, but Janet never truly escaped it. In later interviews, she admitted the events had scarred her. She said she sometimes felt the presence return even decades later. Skeptics claim the children were acting out, playing tricks for attention. Others point to the countless witnesses, including police officers, reporters, and researchers, as proof that something unexplainable really did take place. The Enfield poltergeist remains one of the most famous and hotly debated paranormal cases in the world. So what do you believe? Was this the work of restless spirits, a demonic entity, or just an elaborate hoax? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the scariest part of a haunting isn't the ghost itself, it's the possibility that it could happen to anyone. In November of 1974, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Amityville, New York, was shattered by an act of unthinkable violence. Inside the DeFeo family home, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. picked up a .35 caliber rifle and one by one shot and killed his parents and his 4 younger siblings as they slept. The brutality of the murders shocked the nation, but the terror associated with the house was only beginning. The house remained empty for just over a year. Then, in December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, newly married and full of hope, purchased the home at what seemed like a bargain price. They knew about the tragedy, but they believed the past was behind them. They moved in with Kathy's 3 children, ready to start fresh. What happened during the 28 days that followed would become one of the most infamous haunting stories in American history. At first, life in the house seemed normal, but almost immediately, strange incidents began. George Lutz, who had once been healthy and energetic, suddenly found himself constantly chilled to the bone, even when the fireplace roared with flames. He became irritable, distant, and obsessed with chopping wood and stoking the fire, as though he were under some strange compulsion. Then came the odors. The family described mysterious foul smells, like sewage and decay, drifting through the house with no explanation. Doors slammed shut on their own. Windows locked and unlocked themselves. The family dog barked at empty corners of rooms, hackles raised as if seeing something the human eye could not. Kathy began having terrifying nightmares. Almost every night, she dreamed in vivid detail about the DeFeo murders. She claimed she could see the very order in which Ronald DeFeo killed his family. Each morning, she would wake up around 3:15 a.m., the same time the murders were believed to have occurred. The children, too, began experiencing the unexplainable. Their daughter, Missy, spoke of an imaginary friend she called Jody, who often appeared to her as a large, red-eyed pig with a menacing presence. George and Kathy swore they once saw Jody's glowing eyes staring in at them through a window. When George ran outside to confront it, there was nothing there, only hoof-like tracks in the freshly fallen snow. As the days went by, the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. Black stains appeared on bathroom fixtures that could not be scrubbed away. A crucifix hung on the wall twisted itself upside down. Swarms of flies appeared in rooms in the middle of winter, buzzing angrily despite the freezing cold. The tension between George and Kathy worsened. George claimed that, at times, he would look in the mirror and not recognize his own reflection. Kathy reported feeling as though invisible hands had touched or even embraced her. On one occasion, she claimed to levitate a few feet above the bed, while George, paralyzed in fear, could only watch. The most disturbing events often centered around the children. One night, a window in one of the boys' bedrooms slammed shut with such force that it nearly crushed his hands. Another time, George heard the children screaming, only to find their beds shaking violently, as if some unseen force were trying to throw them from the mattress. As the hauntings escalated, the Lutz family became desperate. They invited a priest to bless the house, hoping for relief. But as soon as the priest began the ritual, a disembodied voice roared, "Get out!" The priest left immediately, warning them never to return to that particular room. By the 4th week, the family was at their breaking point. George described waking in the middle of the night to the sound of a marching band thundering through the house, though nothing could be seen. Kathy reported seeing demonic faces in the shadows. And on their final night in the house, the family claimed to have endured a terrifying onslaught, beds levitating, doors banging, voices screaming, and a dark presence that seemed to engulf the entire home. On January 14, 1976, just 28 days after moving in, the Lutz family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving most of their possessions behind. They never returned. Word of the haunting spread quickly. Reporters, investigators, and even paranormal researchers like Ed and Lorraine Warren descended upon the Amityville house. The Warrens declared the home genuinely haunted, describing it as one of the most malevolent presences they had ever encountered. Photographs taken during their investigation appeared to show ghostly figures, including the eerie image of a young boy with glowing eyes peering from a doorway. Skeptics, however, argued that the entire story was an elaborate hoax, possibly concocted by the Lutz family with the help of an attorney seeking to profit from book and movie deals. To this day, debate rages on. Was the Amityville horror a genuine case of supernatural terror, or simply a tale born from tragedy, greed, and imagination? What cannot be denied is the legacy the story left behind. Books, documentaries, and Hollywood films have cemented the Amityville horror in popular culture as one of the most infamous hauntings in history. But for George and Kathy Lutz and for their children, the fear they claimed to have endured was very real. So, was the Amityville horror truly a brush with the supernatural, or the invention of desperate minds? That is for you to decide. In the mid-1970s, Jack and Janet Smurl thought they had finally found the perfect place to settle down. The couple, along with their 4 daughters, moved into a duplex home in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. At first glance, it was nothing extraordinary, just an ordinary house in a quiet neighborhood. But soon, the Smurls would claim that within its walls lurked something horrifying, something not of this world. The first signs seemed harmless. Appliances began to break down without reason. The television caught fire despite being unplugged. Pipes leaked constantly, though plumbers found nothing wrong. Jack and Janet assumed it was just the wear and tear of an older home. But then the disturbances became harder to explain. Dark stains appeared on the carpet, spreading like ink despite repeated cleaning. Drawers opened and closed by themselves. Strange pounding noises echoed through the house at all hours of the day and night. At first, the family tried to ignore it, but soon they couldn't. The attacks grew more violent. Janet reported being woken at night by an overwhelming feeling of dread, as though someone, or something, was watching her. Jack claimed that while lying in bed, he felt invisible hands grab at him. The family's dog was often found cowering in corners, growling at nothing. One night, their daughters began screaming, saying they saw shadowy figures moving along the walls. On another occasion, Janet said she was levitated from her bed and hurled across the room. The children's toys were thrown violently from shelves as though ripped away by unseen hands. By the early 1980s, the activity had become relentless. Jack and Janet described foul smells, sulfur and rotting flesh, that would suddenly fill the house and vanish just as quickly. Dark, human-like shapes appeared in hallways. Doors banged open and shut in rapid succession. At times, the family heard guttural growls echoing through the rooms, sounds too deep and animalistic to belong to any person. But the most terrifying events were personal. Janet reported being scratched and slapped by an unseen force. Jack claimed he was physically assaulted by what he believed to be a demon, describing encounters so violent and humiliating that he refused to speak of them in detail for years. Desperate for help, the Smurls turned to the Catholic Church, asking priests to bless the home. But even after holy water was sprinkled and prayers were recited, the disturbances continued. That's when they reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the well-known paranormal investigators who had previously studied the Amityville case. The Warrens arrived in 1986, and almost immediately, they claimed to sense the presence of multiple spirits within the Smurl home. Lorraine, who described herself as a clairvoyant, reported feeling a dark, oppressive energy, what she believed to be demonic. The Warrens asserted that the house was infested by a powerful entity that thrived on fear and despair. Their investigation was unsettling. They described seeing shadowy figures, hearing inhuman voices, and feeling cold spots that moved unnaturally through the house. Lorraine claimed to witness Janet levitate, while Ed reported being pushed by an invisible force. According to the Warrens, the Smurl family was under siege from not just one, but 4 spirits, one of which was a demon. The Warrens attempted multiple exorcisms, but the entity seemed to grow stronger. They even claimed that during one attempt, the demon followed them home, tormenting them with the same sounds and smells the Smurls had described. Meanwhile, the Smurls' plight became national news. Newspapers, television shows, and skeptics all descended on West Pittston. Some neighbors claimed they too had heard strange sounds from the house, while others dismissed the story as nothing more than a desperate grab for attention. Critics pointed out that no physical evidence could prove the haunting was real. Some suggested the Smurls were experiencing stress-induced hallucinations. Others believed the family had fabricated the story to profit from book deals and media coverage. But the Smurls insisted they were telling the truth. They said no amount of skepticism could erase the horrors they endured. For over a decade, the family lived under siege. They claimed the attacks followed them even when they tried to leave the house, proving that it was not simply tied to the property but to their lives themselves. Eventually, after repeated exorcisms and years of suffering, the disturbances seemed to subside in the late 1980s. But the Smurls were never the same. The fear, the trauma, and the stigma of being associated with one of America's most famous hauntings haunted them long after the activity stopped. To this day, the Smurl haunting remains one of the most controversial cases in paranormal history. Believers point to the consistency of the family's accounts and the involvement of the Warrens as evidence of authenticity. Skeptics, however, dismiss it as exaggeration, hysteria, or fabrication. But one thing is certain: for Jack and Janet Smurl and for their daughters, the terror they described was not just a ghost story. It was their reality. So, was the Smurl haunting a true case of demonic possession, or simply a nightmare born from stress and imagination? The answer, perhaps, will never be known. In the quiet town of Pontefract, West Yorkshire, England, stands an ordinary-looking house at 30 East Drive. From the outside, it appears no different than any other council home built in the mid-20th century. But to those familiar with paranormal history, it is anything but ordinary. This modest house is believed to be the site of the most violent poltergeist haunting in all of Europe. The entity that supposedly terrorized the family who lived there became infamous as the Black Monk of Pontefract. The story begins in 1966, when Joe and Jean Pritchard moved into the house with their son Philip and daughter Diane. At first, everything seemed normal. But not long after they settled in, strange disturbances began to occur. It started subtly, pools of water forming mysteriously on the kitchen floor, even though no pipes were leaking. Electrical equipment would switch on and off by itself. Lights flickered, doors slammed, and an icy chill seemed to follow certain rooms. The family tried to dismiss these events as odd coincidences. But the disturbances escalated quickly. Objects began to move on their own. Teacups flew across the room, plants were hurled from their pots, and heavy furniture shifted with an unseen force. One particularly terrifying incident involved a large grandfather clock that was lifted and slammed down violently in front of horrified witnesses. The Pritchards realized this was not simply the creaking of an old house. Something unseen was sharing their home, and it was growing bolder. The poltergeist seemed to have a particular fascination with the Pritchards' teenage daughter, Diane. On multiple occasions, she reported being dragged from her bed by invisible hands, sometimes pulled violently up the stairs. Neighbors who came to help the family during the chaos claimed to have witnessed these attacks firsthand. Diane also suffered scratches and bruises that appeared without explanation. Then came the first sightings of what gave the haunting its infamous name. Both family members and visitors reported seeing the apparition of a tall, hooded figure dressed in a monk's robes. Its face was often obscured in shadow, but some said they saw hollow, dark eyes peering from beneath the hood. This terrifying figure became known as the Black Monk. Paranormal researchers later speculated that the entity could be tied to a nearby medieval monastery, where, according to legend, a 16th-century monk was executed for heinous crimes. Some believed the spirit of this disgraced monk had attached itself to the land where the house now stood. The haunting continued with disturbing regularity. The poltergeist threw objects with incredible force: cutlery, ornaments, even knives. Walls were scratched with strange markings. Loud banging noises echoed throughout the house at all hours of the night. Family members described icy gusts of wind rushing through closed rooms. The violence toward Diane reached terrifying new levels. She was reportedly thrown from her bed, slapped by invisible hands, and even strangled by electrical cords. On one occasion, she was dragged across the entire house in full view of her family. Each attack left the Pritchards more terrified and more convinced that something evil was in control of their home. Word spread quickly about the haunting, and the house became the subject of fascination across Britain. Paranormal investigators, journalists, and even skeptics came to witness the phenomena. Many left convinced that something supernatural was happening. Visitors reported being pelted with objects, shoved by invisible forces, and overwhelmed by a sense of dread the moment they entered the home. Yet, no one could explain how or why these events occurred. The activity showed intelligence, responding to the family's fear and sometimes even mocking them. The poltergeist was known to mimic voices, repeating conversations in distorted tones, as though it enjoyed taunting the family. The Pritchards endured this torment for years. Unlike many hauntings that fade over time, the Black Monk seemed to grow more malicious as the years went on. Even after priests attempted blessings and exorcisms, the entity remained. Eventually, as the children grew older and left home, the disturbances lessened. Some believed the poltergeist had fixated on Diane, and once she was gone, it lost its power. But for the Pritchards, the scars of living with such relentless terror never faded. Today, 30 East Drive remains one of the most infamous haunted houses in the world. Paranormal investigators still visit the property, with some claiming the Black Monk continues to make his presence known. Reports of cold spots, sudden bangs, and even apparitions persist to this day. Skeptics argue that the case was nothing more than exaggeration, teenage pranks, or mass hysteria fueled by fear and media attention. But believers insist that so many witnesses, including neighbors and visitors, could not have imagined the same terrifying events. The question remains, was the Black Monk truly the spirit of a disgraced medieval monk, forever bound to the land where he met his end? Or was it something darker, something demonic that delighted in the suffering of the Pritchard family? What cannot be denied is the impact of the haunting. For decades, the story of the Black Monk of Pontefract has been told and retold, cementing its place as one of the most chilling ghost stories in modern history. So, was it legend, hoax, or a genuine glimpse into the terrifying unknown? The answer lies behind the quiet walls of 30 East Drive, a house that may forever be home to the Black Monk.